Hi there, and welcome to Next Frontier. My name is Thomas Anderson, founder and CEO of Responsibly, and Next Frontier is my show about sustainability in the supply chain. Today, I'm talking with Anastasia Kuskova. Anastasia used to run sustainability at ERG, Eurasian Resources Group. Now, that's one of the largest companies in the metals and mining industry, an industry that's both notorious for some of the ESG issues related to conflict minerals, but is also crucial for the energy transition that we're on. At ERG, Anastasia had to prioritize all of these different sustainability issues. So we discussed how to do that, but also what the conflicts are when coordinating sustainability in a company that typically has a fairly short planning horizon. Anastasia was also deeply involved with their supplier programs. So we talk a little bit about that and how to practically work with suppliers, but also how that led her to create an industry program called Resource, where she collaborated with some of the largest mining companies and onboarded users like Tesla. Resource can probably be considered a success by now. But Anastasia is not overly optimistic about industry collaborations and talked about how they often end up creating more PR announcements than actual results. So that was really interesting to talk about. Anastasia is now out of ERG and she's building an impact startup called Sirius, still focused on accelerating sustainability change in the metals and mining industry, but now from the startup perspective instead of the corporate perspective. So she had some interesting comments about the change from the startup to the corporate world when affecting change for sustainability. Okay, Anastasia Kuskova, CEO and founder of Sirius and former head of sustainability at ERG. Here we go. Hello, Anastasia.
Hi, Thomas.
Good to see you. We just did the whole small talk without hitting recording, so now we're doing it again. But how are you doing today, Anastasia? How was your morning?
Very good. There is a bit of sun, a bit of snow in Amsterdam, which is actually feels like winter, proper winter. So I'm super excited. Yeah. How is it? How are things with you?
We have snow as well, and as I just mentioned to you, I mean, I have a 2.5-year-old, right, a small kid, so getting him ready every morning in the big snowsuit is just a struggle, and that gets you started with the day, right? So but beyond that, it's been a great morning. It's sunny, everything is good, and I'm excited to talk to you today, Anastasia. So thank you so much for joining, and welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to join you here.
No, that's great to hear. There's quite a lot of things I want to talk to you about, right? So, this is not the first time we meet, but what I really like about this format is that I get to ask you questions that I don't normally would ask you. So I'm really interested in seeing where this conversation goes. But there's basically 3 things I want to talk with you about, right? I want to talk with you about your time running sustainability for one of the largest companies in an industry that notoriously has some ESG issues, right? So what were the challenges there and everything? I'm really excited to hear more about that. I also want to discuss industry initiatives with you because you've been involved with quite a few. And, it's often seen sometimes as this holy grail for how do we conquer sustainability? We all collaborate, but I think, maybe behind the scenes, not everything is so smooth and black and white. So I really want to get your perspective there. And then, now you've started a pretty cool sustainability startup called Sirius. So I want to hear all about that. And I want to hear the journey of tackling sustainability in a big corporate to, in a startup, right? So all of these things we'll get to go through. But first of all, you're now all about sustainability, right? You've been all about for sustainability for a while, but you didn't start in sustainability. So tell me a little bit about, the journey. How did you get into sustainability?
Yeah, thanks. Yes, indeed. I actually I have a financial background.
Okay.
And I started in management consulting, and as many of us, and in strategy. And slowly I started to accumulate around myself all of the projects about sustainability because they were the most unloved ones and nobody wanted to deal with them. And I was kind of excited about this, and it was something interesting. And I also had I would call it a career crisis around like when I was 26, 27.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like 25, 26. So I put together all of the things I was interested about. And there were a lot, like very random things, like, I don't know, like rowing or doing like art stuff. And I don't know how that would help me to get out of the career crisis, but I just was like a brain dump.
Very
And there were,
management consulting, going full on rowing.
yeah, I mean, it didn't work. Two times under the rain in Amsterdam didn't work. So there was the like Korean sustainability, blockchain, big data, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And also international law. So, and I started like slowly getting deeper into each subject and filtering out things that I didn't like. And then essentially the things that stuck were within sustainability and within surprisingly blockchain. So blockchain like for supply chain and so on.
Okay.
And once you get deeper, you start to see opportunities within the company. And especially I was lucky enough to be in a very open environment within my team. So I could just say, you know, I see this opportunity and need this opportunity that we can do within the company. Can I do that as a side project and so on?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and I started accumulating those projects around myself, and slowly, I was the person to go to for sustainability or subjects related to sustainability. And then we created whole structure and function. And then after a while, it became big function. We created a sustainability committee at the board level and so on. So because things also became very important. Well, they were always important, like on environment basis, but not like corporate sustainability, you know, the way we understand sustainability now. It was more CSR, environment, maybe community management, but all those distributed around different functions, not really at the CEO level. And I was reporting to CEO, so to deputy CEO. So it was, it was a big move and a lot of changes within the company. And started like that.
That's interesting. So you kind of fell into it almost. I think a lot of people do that with sustainability. That's at least what I hear, or at least maybe that's how it was, right? Because it started, as you say, kind of with the CSR movement, triple bottom line. It wasn't very sexy when I was studying. I remember it was like, corporate social responsibility. You know, nobody really, cared that much about it. It's very different now, right? It's like now it's somehow the rebranding to sustainability and ESG has become a lot more sexy. I think now it's a career, right? You study it, you go into it, you want to be like the head of sustainability, but you were really in that transition, right? And I think a lot of people just sort of fall into it, and then suddenly they're the go-to person on this new complex topic, and then you were running things.
Yeah, and it was also a lot about being very excited about it, because otherwise, there are so many issues within the company where you are the biggest salesperson, right? So because it's this is the field where you are engaged with a lot of stakeholders. So you have to do a lot of stakeholder management in many functions. That's the case, but in sustainability specifically, and you constantly have to sell what's in it for me, why I have to care about this, like not hugging trees type of thing, but really going into this more practical things, costs, risks, benefits, profit, and so on, like opportunities, new clients, new markets. You have to be very strategic about it. And for a long time, and I remember now that for a long time it would be like zero feedback, and nobody, like one person who is like really reviewing your projects and your results and so on. But then at some point, as you mentioned, it became like a huge thing, because banks started to ask about it, insurance companies started to ask for that, clients started to ask for that, and then it became bigger and stronger, and then everyone was like, yeah, we need to do something about sustainability and so on.
That's interesting. You're highlighting one of the things that I believe a lot in, and we'll talk a lot more about it, but that interaction that happens in the supply chain when you're getting your customers asking, you're getting your investors asking, you're getting your banks asking, right? Then it becomes like, oh, maybe this topic is actually worth investing in, right? But we'll talk a lot more about that. So you led sustainability at ERG, Eurasian Resources Group, right? So huge company in the metals and mining industry, more than 80,000 employees. How do you manage sustainability in such a large company? How do you prioritize?
Well, good question. I think priorities change through time,
Mhm.
and it's critical that it's driven from sea level.
Okay.
So, and also it would depend by region, right? Because we had in ERG, we had various regions. In Africa, that would be one focus. In Brazil, obviously, there are like completely different aspects, focusing on rainforest, focusing on
Mhm.
communities. In Africa, more focusing on water, focusing on communities, on
Mm.
compliance, and all of those things. In Kazakhstan, would be completely different thing, right? So it's very important that you have kind of top level agenda from your CEO, what you want to be as a company. And it doesn't come at one point, right?
Yeah.
You grew, you we grew to that. So it was very basic in the beginning, where we would look at the competition and just say, well, that's what they are looking at. Maybe we should look at that as well. And then you would tailor it to material topics for at your in local regions,
Yeah.
right? And there would be this balancing act on what's important, but it also drives. I mean, and I'm going to sound very consulting now, but it has to be aligned with your values within the company. So you can say. I mean, there are quite a few, not naming names, but there are quite a few companies that have this enormous contradiction in the way that what they do, and in the way what they have in sustainability, in their goals and sustainability. So
Mhm.
sometimes their sustainability targets contradict their values or actually their product.
Okay.
And that's a bit like, I don't know, you are a huge beverage company, and then you say, we're going to be clean water, no water usage, and no plastic. And
Mhm.
then you look at the at the products and at the plastic all on the outside, on the street somewhere in Indonesia, and then well, something doesn't work.
Yeah.
But there is a lot in sustainability that this contradiction actually has to be there, because we have to rethink business models.
Mhm.
So there's this balancing act on aligning with your values, but also challenging them a little bit,
Yeah.
and rethinking with with the changing environment, and in metals specifically right now, right? Because it's a critical industry for energy transition. It's very complex and dirty industry at the same time.
Mhm.
And if you power, and there's like, there's still a lot of people on on the internet saying electric cars are bad. So and but there are quite a few bad things about creating an electric car, and
Yeah.
we need to powering this electric car, we need a lot of metals, and we need to ensure that those metals becoming more sustainable.
Mhm.
So, and you rethink the way you work a lot. So yeah,
It's a
long answer.
no, that's great. There's a few things there that I wanted to pick up on. The last thing you said, I think, is interesting, right? Because the entire sustainability transition requires investment, and it requires building new things, right? Finding out new methods of doing things. Like if you take the electric vehicle example, it's very polluting to create an electric vehicle, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of emissions involved with that, and then yes, you're going to be running it at lower emissions. Um, but how do you get outside of that, right? Because if you want to have the green alternative, which is the electric vehicle, then you probably need to create a lot of new assets that didn't exist before, right? New manufacturing processes, new vehicles, etc. And there's just going to be a burden on that, but there's not really any way around it, right? It's like we have to accept this short-term need to create stuff that's going to cost on the environment in order to fuel the long-term transition.
100%. I think there are two things that I understood through the process of becoming more professional within the sustainability
Hmm.
field. And one is nothing is black and white in sustainability, in managing all of those aspects, because if you push on one aspect, another one goes down and so on. So it's always balancing act. Nothing is black and white. And second is things take time.
Yeah.
And it's always a process, and sustainability is a process.
Mm-hmm.
You always can do things better. You always will be challenged as a professional, as a company for your results and so on. And you won't be challenged only if you don't demonstrate anything and you don't talk about problems and so on.
Yeah.
So those are two things. And like more of a side note to respond to your question. And I think it's very important to have this direction on where we want to be in 5, 10, 15 years as a company. And this is a huge challenge for the management team, because nobody plans to be in the company for 10, 15 years, right? The planning horizon is shorter.
Yeah.
So you start investing in something and you have to, so this is the board responsibility, because board is planning to be there for 10, 15 years, right? And boards need to set the agenda for the management team, so they don't have the agency problem, so they don't have this short-termism thinking, short-term thinking that stops them from investing in sustainability. And there've been, I think there was a Wharton model from like Wharton Business School, where they evaluate they assess the value of the company and the shareholder value the company creates based on not today value of the shares, but also effect on various material topics. And we see that some companies that are more short-termistic, their shares are higher now, but actually, if we look at the real value, it's much lower.
Yeah.
So maybe changing this and thinking more long-term and really trying to embed the value of sustainability in the decision-making would support those investments, huge investments that we need to make in the transition. And it's also, like all of those things that when you then you start like with renewable energy, right? We needed huge investment to make it sensible for to build. We needed huge subsidies to actually support renewable energy. But then at some point, now it's cheaper. Okay, now it's good. So we really need to go through that cliff, and the companies that didn't jump on it right on time will be behind, significantly behind. They might be profitable now, but not in 2 or 3 years. And this is the board direction. And if board doesn't see value in sustainability, as a management team, you can't do much.
No, I think that's a very interesting point. We're kind of going back, as you say, to the old age governance issues, short-term versus long-term thinking when you're on the public markets. I noticed the other day we had the corporate nights coming out, one of the kind of ESG accreditations. You can talk good or bad things about them. But what was interesting was there was quite a lot of Danish companies on that compared to the size of Denmark. What I also noticed was that 3 of the 5 Danish companies on the top 100 list were all owned by the Novo Foundation, which is privately owned, right? So now we're back to kind of talking planning horizons, right? And the old saying of saying, hey, family-owned companies have longer term planning horizons, which we've seen from a shareholder value creation can actually give more value long term. It's probably the same thing for sustainability, right? So I think that's super interesting. I want to get back to the prioritization question. So what you basically said, what you guys did was, hey, there's a lot of topics. They are regionally dependent. We have different topics in different regions. We use materiality analysis to define partly what's at risk and where do we need to go. Materiality analysis, for those who don't know, is basically different types of analyses on a regional, on a topic or industry level that tells you, hey, let's say as you mentioned in Brazil, for example, deforestation is a big topic, right? In Africa or some parts of Africa, water stewardship is a big topic, right? So I really like that, because that's what we see on our end as well. ESG is just so many things. We cannot tackle everything everywhere. We got to focus. In that prioritization, where did the supply chain fit in?
So for metal and mining, this is one of the top areas, and it's been there even before, right?
Mhm.
So there are quite a few, especially if you source from Africa, because there are a lot of issues with human rights, with forced labor, child labor, and so on. We can go into detail in this, but there are quite a few issues historically. So companies historically asking a lot of questions about that. And then we come to electric vehicles,
Mm-hmm.
and we come to shiny Teslas, and with cobalt that comes from DRC, or we don't know where it comes from, and or our iPhones and so on. And people start to ask questions, and then you also get a lot of, especially now with social media, you get a lot of like, oh, this, all of your iPhones are powered by child labor and things like that, which don't actually have a basis behind, but still, or some. And also there were huge Amnesty International discoveries and investigations, fantastic work. And you see that there are a lot of issues within the industry. And once those things become public, and you have Amnesty International talking about it and people talking about it, companies start to care, and companies at the end of the supply chain using metals. And we have to, and here I think makes sense to say that pretty much our like most of our daily lives are powered by metals, right? So, and for the green economy, we need 4 to 6 times more metals for electric cars, for wind turbines, for our electric devices, for anything and everything, for better construction, for and so on. So 4 to 6 times, right? And so everything, a lot of things start from metals, and the supply chains are very complex and long. And here the ability to actually say that your cobalt comes from was ethically sourced, that it was industrial production, or it was a ASM production which was controlled and there were no child labor involved, that there were no forced labor and so on. It's critically important for companies like Tesla, like Apple, also Google, and I also recently saw that Meta is looking into this. I'm not sure how metals go into their supply chain, but somehow they do. And so it becomes critically important. And then you start to think about traceability, about supply chain, also just governance in general, ethical sourcing, and so on. So, and you have a lot of names for that. But
yeah, there's so much to unpack there, right? Let's see how much we actually get to unpack. Tell me about it from the ERG perspective. How did you tackle supply chain? Like, what were some of the initiatives you guys had? What were some of the struggles? How did you handle them? Any kind of learnings, do's and don'ts?
So for us, supply chain sustainability was one of the material topics, so one of the key ones, and I actually believe it's one of the leading companies in terms of building this, especially in terms of African supply chain. So for metals coming from Africa.
Okay.
We have production in DRC. So ERG has production in DRC. And one of initiatives that we started within ERG, and then that grew as an cross-industry collaboration, and now a startup called Resource. It's focused on tracing metal from mine to EV battery. And also ERG is a founding partner of Global Battery Alliance. So huge organization working on battery supply chain sustainability. And Benedict, CEO of ERG, I think chair of GBA. So a lot of investment goes into this, and a lot of mental energy within the company also devoted to supply chain sustainability. And I think Resource is super exciting, and I led this within ERG and actually pitched it to our top management like 10 times. On the 10th time I heard yes, okay, let's do that. It was about really using blockchain for technology that was just becoming popular. We didn't have this, web-free flavor around it yet. And we were speaking about tracing our metal from mine to EV batteries and hoping to differentiate using this. And then we realized after some time that it wouldn't make sense if we do it alone, and it wouldn't make sense to use that to differentiate, because we actually dependent on survivability of this industry, because there were a lot of talk like Tesla saying we are not going to do any more to use any more cobalt in batteries and so on. And you know that the entire economy of DRC depends on the metals. So if there is no more cobalt used, all of the issues that we're talking of like that we want to solve, they are going to get worse, because there won't be money flowing in the country. And there's, again, black and white thinking. We just exclude cobalt. That's not solution of the problem. So we were working we got together with China Moly, one of the biggest producers of cobalt in DRC, and Glencore. And we started working on industry initiative on this resource and building a traceability system from mine to EV battery. Tesla became the first user of this. They write about it in their impact report, so more information there. And I think that we've done huge work. It was an amazing experience for me personally, but also for companies and for in terms of championing this idea of traceability, of actually being able to trace metals, not to track it with a chain of custody and spreadsheet and just say, confirm that you received 100 tons from this guy, confirming over the phone or whatever, but actually tracing it technologically and making sure that nobody can tamper with that was super important and very new. And there were new technologies and new approaches that developed through that process. So it was a painful process for me to separate from this work, but I really love that, and I really hope that Resource becomes a huge company as well.
That's super interesting, and I think amazing being able to get three of the biggest companies in that industry to collaborate, getting very big players on board like Tesla for using it. I want to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. I also have my own personal skepticism to just blockchain as a technology. For me, it's a hammer, right? Is it the right hammer? Let's get into that. But I also want to talk a little bit more practically. So one of the things that you guys did at ERG was that you started this industry collaboration, traceability, to find out where did those minerals come from. What else did you guys do from a supplier engagement angle, supplier sustainability angle?
So you mean working with our suppliers, or being a supplier in the beginning of the supply chain? The first one.
Probably more working with your suppliers, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that work started a bit later. So we realized that actually, even though we're at the beginning of a lot of supply chains, we're also at the end of many. Yeah. And we started to receive questions about our work with responsible sourcing and so on. It was a few years after we started working on automotive supply chain, so being at the beginning. So we realized that we need to look backwards as well. And we started to prioritize the suppliers with whom we should work. The biggest suppliers, what we need to trace, what we need to control. So identify the parameters that are important for us, because they're a bit different compared to what we need to report. So it also driven largely by where we source from. So whether we source from Karo regions, so conflict affected and high risk areas, we needed to, especially with the new regulations coming within Europe, so we needed to start looking in this beforehand, so that once the regulations come in place. Also, LME started to ask questions, and they were in the beginning of forming this LME responsible sourcing requirements, which are right now live and everyone has to comply and so on. But we were the first company actually testing with them.
What's LME? Was that one of your customers?
London Metal Exchange. So London Metal Exchange, they
Okay.
have this responsible sourcing requirement for all of the metals that are being listed, for all of the listed brands at London Metal Exchange. I think it's a fantastic initiative and fantastic work. And we were one of the first ones to working on that, to testing this. And there was also like, I think that's my bit of a startup approach that I try to use in corporate, that whenever anyone asked us to pilot something, we would be, let's do that.
Yeah.
We'll be the first one to test it. So we've done it with ICDA for our Chromium methods. For ICDA is International Chromium Development Association. We've done it with Caschrom, which is a huge chromium production, ferroalloys and chromium production asset. We've done with LME for our aluminium assets and so on. So we test that. So going back to your question, so we started identifying what are key aspects for us to test the suppliers, where it comes from, what requirements we set for them. And of course, for your suppliers, you can't require more from them than you require from yourself. And also you have to tailor and phase in those requirements, right? So there could be smaller companies that are for some reason a priority for you because they come from risk area, or they have high risk because this is a risky product, whatever. So you have to prioritize and tailor. And there was a lot of work with the procurement team and a lot of, again, championing and selling, because why should they care about it? Like, we always care about buying cheaper.
Yeah.
So in this, I think there was a big mental shift on really motivating procurement team to start embed different parameters beyond pricing and quality in their decision-making model. And we started implementing that. I have to say that it wasn't finished by the end, by the time when I left, but there were a lot of work done. And one of the first pilots that we've done at Sirius was actually on this, to support ERG in implementing this work with their suppliers.
Interesting. Okay, super interesting. So in terms of kind of best practices from your side, so you talked a little bit about, okay, we got to phase it in with suppliers, not start with everything at once, but kind of incrementally increase it. What else? Was there any kind of best practices or even worse practices, to be honest, that you just said, okay, when we started doing that, it didn't work. We had to rethink our approach.
Yeah, 100%. So there was, I think, poor communication on our side, because we had this, our ESG committee. So we're sitting at the ESG committee and we decide, so we are starting to, for those key materials, we start to ask about scope 1 and 2 of our suppliers. So, and then so you write it in the minutes, and then it goes into the task management system within the company and so on. And then I started to receive calls from our procurement team that they receive calls from their suppliers crying and saying, I don't know what scope 1 is. So why don't you pay me? I don't know what scope 1 is. And you're like, what? How? Like, it was like not a necessary requirement. It should not ever depend on the payment to the suppliers and so on. So it was like a glitch of a system that it went, scope 1 and 2 went into the contract for some of the companies, only a few, and was fixed very, very fast.
Okay.
But it was just the communication issue that we're like, okay, let's start asking. And it was like, okay, we embedded in the contract, and that becomes a criteria for payment. And then you get some lady in Kazakhstan calling you and crying that because she doesn't know what scope 1 is. So that's a bad practice.
And
Don't do that.
That's super interesting, right? And like, I heard another version of this, a little bit less drastic, from, I think it was Heineken, started surveying their suppliers on greenhouse gases emissions. One supplier came back and say, we don't have any greenhouses, right? And you know, I think we just, if we work with sustainability full time, day to day, we kind of forget that maybe not everybody does that, and there's actually quite a lot of technical buzzwords and terms here. So there's a major supplier education effort there as well. Did you guys do anything around that?
Yes, yes. So we had actually a big program devoted to supplier engagement
Hmm.
and training and so on. I don't know how it ended. It was there was a lot of resources invested in this. I need to check on the status.
Hmm.
And I think in general, the understanding was that we do it quite slowly, and we start to explain and work with individually with the suppliers. So and that's where like when we initially started Sirius, that's where we wanted to focus on
Hmm.
really educating suppliers and really giving them more like easier way of getting through all of the buzzwords and really understanding how to comply with the requirements.
Yeah.
And we realized that we pivoted a few times as typical in startup, but we're still in the same space, but you know, looking from a different perspective. But yeah.
That's quite exciting. So tell me, what would you define Sirius as today? What do you guys do?
So, Sirius, we are AI-driven sustainability copilot for mining metal companies,
Okay.
and we focus. We're really building a data infrastructure, sustainability data infrastructure for companies, trying to eliminate all of those questionnaires, web forms. You know what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
and trying to be the data layer between the companies.
Hmm.
So, if, for example, London Metal Exchange, in formulating their requirements to the metal suppliers, asks 25 questions, they are transformed in the data and they connect it to sustainability twin of a company.
Hmm.
So we essentially with Sirius we build a sustainability twin for a company. It's like a unique sustainability profile, and we use AI to transform data from various documents, certificates, environmental product declarations, and so on into this twin.
Hmm.
It's mapped to our model, and then any stakeholder within the supply chain can request information from this using various tools, various web forms, spreadsheets, or whatever you name it, to extract this data from the twin. And our AI helps to ensure that you can get whatever information you need without actually asking sustainability person to fill in yet another request.
Hmm.
So, and we also do analytics like what are your customers in Germany asking you about? How compliant you are with XYZ regulation that's coming in next year, and so on, based on the information in between. But yeah, we're a data company, not really assessment or evaluation or anything like that.
Got it. That's super exciting. And how has it been going from tackling sustainability in a big corporate to now running a startup to try to make a dent?
I think two aspects. So one, essentially, in many cases, nothing changed. Like I'm just sitting from a different side of a table with a lot of the same people and a lot of the same companies and so on.
Hmm.
So and also solving a problem for my former self, right? Because we would get 10, 15 requests a month, or 2 years ago, and now it's 50 to 60 requests a month. So how to ensure that you actually don't do the monkey work, but you get insights out of this, and like yeah, solving my personal frustration.
Hmm.
But the second part is completely different, right? Then you have a corporate job, which is safe. You get you get paid very well, flying to events, and yeah, having. I didn't think I had an easy life back then, but now I think I have an easy life.
It's all about perspective, isn't
It's
it?
a lot of stress and ups and downs, and yeah, but exciting, and I love it. And I also see that within one company you can change one company,
Hmm.
or maybe you we tried to influence industry, of course, and I hope we did, but still with a startup you have this multiple. So and I think we've implemented fantastic things within ERG, and I saw that we can do better if we do that at the industry level, if we start building solutions that will enable teams within all of the mining companies, mining metal companies, to perform better. And that's what we're doing. We're empowering sustainability teams.
That's awesome. That's a great pitch, Anastasia. I really like that. One last thing, because you teased to me that you had some critical perspectives on industry collaborations, right? So I really want to ask you that question before we wrap up. Tell me about that.
I think it's very difficult to get value out of it. So you need to be super mindful when you build it, that it doesn't end as a communication stunt, right? So to actually get out something meaningful, you have to have people who are 100% responsible for that, because otherwise it's just a side job for everyone, and then it gets constantly deprioritized. Things are much slower than if it's done. So at some point you think, I would do that outside as a startup, that would be 10 times faster, right? Because you have to agree on a lot of things. Corporates in general are super risk averse, so they would be 10 rounds of negotiation and communication and talking, and in the end you get something vanilla. It's a lot about like cope process, right? You get to like vanilla thing, you had a huge ambition, and then you get this, what is this? And then, but at the same time, getting something out of COP is, I mean, imagine negotiating with all of those countries and having all of those lobbyists around and so on. So it's very good result, but you already discount it, right? So, that's the difficult part. And I think, and here it comes my startup perspective. I think every startup, for first years of existence, lives on founder energy. So founders really feed the startup and fuel the startup. And I think here the same with the industry initiative. You need people who are fueling, who really want this to happen. And if you don't have those people, if it's a side job for I don't know, 10, 15 stakeholders, nothing's going to come out of it. You're just going to have a vanilla press release and 10 meaningless meetings, and that's it. So you really need to have people who are passionate about it beyond just words, who actually want to devote time and energy to this, and who are going to spend and push it when it's stuck.
Got it. That makes a ton of sense. And I guess it's it's hard enough to create change within your own company, right? And now having to coordinate change across a large list of companies obviously doesn't make it easier. But one of your recommendations would then be, make sure you invest dedicated resources in it, and don't just take a lot of professionals that have a full-time day job and say, hey, now you need to run this industry initiative on the side. But
100%
people to do it.
100%. And I think that's one of the key factors of actually getting something out of industry initiatives. If you have a person who lives and breathes this initiative and actually is dependent on the success of this initiative.
Got it.
Maybe a bit drastic, but yeah.
That was amazing. Thank you so much for that. Any last words you want to leave listeners with on how to get started on supply chain sustainability? Pick one to finish off on.
Yeah, how to get started. Well, I guess first understand why you're doing that, right? And when you understand why, understand what are the priorities. And two things, nothing's black and white, and it's always a process. So just get with it. Definitely. And prioritize. I think that's one of your recent LinkedIn posts, right? Like why you need to prioritize when you start with supply chain sustainability. So just one by one, first understanding the priorities also for your suppliers, priority suppliers, and why. That's the most important.
Awesome. So get with it, find out what you want to do, and prioritize.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Anastasia, thank you so much. That was great. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you, Thomas. Super nice talking to you.
Likewise. Have a great day.
You too. Cheers.
If you're still here, then first of all, thank you so much for listening. If you've got thoughts about this episode or what you'd like to hear more of, you can email us at thomas@nextfrontier.earth. We really do read every email. You can also hit me up directly on LinkedIn. Just search for Thomas Buch Andersen. That's Thomas Buch Andersen. If you feel like it, please share with your friends and subscribe wherever you listen to our podcast. We also have a YouTube channel. It's on @nextfrontierearth if you want to see what we actually look like in person. And if you really love the show, hit us with that 5-star review. Today's episode was produced and edited by Christina Sotu, and Next Frontier music is by Keyhole. See you next time.